Dead America. Tales of the First Month. The Delivery Boy by Derek Slayton. Chapter 1. Lexington, Kentucky. The morning of day 0. The alarm on Kevin's phone pierced the stillness of the night, the screen illuminating the darkness of his room in a faint glow. The 16-year-old groaned as he flung his hand toward the nightstand, smacking at the device several times before finding the snooze button. "You don't have time to sleep in. Get your butt in gear and get moving," Kevin muttered to himself, imitating his own internal drill sergeant. With a deep, regretful sigh, Kevin forced himself to sit up in bed. The phone alarm was now silent, but the sun still hid behind the horizon, leaving his room in complete darkness. With another deep sigh, he clicked on the lamp, momentarily blinding himself. "How do adults do this every single day?" he grumbled, rubbing his eyes. "I swear, when I'm old enough, I'm going to start investing in lottery tickets." Dragging himself out of bed, Kevin shuffled out of his room and across the hall to the bathroom. It took several minutes to go through his morning routine, none of which did much to wake him up. "Just get through the morning," he told his reflection. "Then you can take a nap in first period. Who needs algebra anyway?" Forcing himself to get dressed, Kevin grabbed some jeans and a light jacket to go over his t-shirt. He knew the fall weather would be cool, but he figured he'd be getting a workout soon enough. As he stumbled out of his bedroom, Kevin tripped over yesterday's outfit, which lay beside the hamper. He caught himself on the wall, nearly knocking down a family portrait of himself, his mom, and his sister. He managed to grab it before it hit the ground, but the clatter echoed through the quiet house. "Kevin, what are you doing up this early?" His younger sister, Alana, called from her bedroom, her voice muffled by the door. Even with the door between them, he could hear the illness in her voice, whiny, nasal, and unmistakable, worse than her usual healthy whine. "I'm sorry, Alana, go back to sleep. You've got another hour before you need to get ready for school." "I don't think I'm going today," she replied. "I don't feel good." Kevin sighed, shaking his head. "You know Mom's not going to be happy if you stay home." "She won't know if you don't tell her. She's working a double today." Kevin's thoughts drifted to their mother, working through the night and morning rush before coming home. Things had been hard since their father left 6 months ago, which was why he was up at this hour to help earn some extra money. But having a job before school wasn't his only responsibility. "Tell the truth, Alana. Are you really sick?" Her whining intensified. "I swear, Kevin, I don't think I can get out of bed." Kevin stood outside her door, staring at it as if he could see her through it. After a moment of contemplation, he relented. "Okay, Alana, I'll let you stay home and not tell Mom, but you owe me." "Really, Kevin? I'm sick and you're going to make me owe you for letting me stay home?" "I'm the older brother. It's my job to make your life difficult," he teased, a small smirk creeping onto his face. Rather than join in the banter, Alana responded with a series of coughs. "Are you okay, Alana?" Kevin asked, his voice tinged with concern. "Nope, I'm dying in here," she replied dramatically. "Well, as long as you die in your room and not mine, we'll be fine," he said, trying to lighten the mood. More coughing came from behind the door, followed by Alana's weak voice. "Will you fix me some breakfast, Kevin?" "I can't right now, Alana. I've got to go. The sun's not even up yet, and school's still a couple hours away. Where are you going?" "I've got to get to Mr. Gregory's house and pick up the candy delivery. I've got to hit 100 houses before class starts." "But Mom's got the car," Alana reminded him. "I know. I'm riding my bike." "What is this? 1950? Kevin chuckled. "Yeah, I know, sis. But Mr. Gregory loves that era, so me making deliveries on my bike is right up his alley." There was a pause before Alana spoke again, her voice quieter this time. "Kevin." "Yeah, sis? Will you at least save me some candy? I think it'll make me feel better." A small smile tugged at Kevin's lips, and he nodded, even though she couldn't see him. Despite how much of a pain she could be, he loved his sister. "I'll see what I can do, sis, but I really gotta go." Be safe, Kevin. You get some rest. I'll try to swing back by before heading up to the school. Alana's only reply was another fit of coughing. Rather than wait for a coherent response, Kevin made his way to the kitchen, grabbing an energy drink on his way out the door. The night air was crisp, and the moon provided just enough light to illuminate the neighborhood streets. With one hand on the handlebars of his bike, Kevin popped the top of his energy drink and began chugging it. By the time he reached the end of the next block, the can was empty. He crushed it and tossed it into a trash can by the side of the road. "Oh, that's some good stuff," Kevin muttered to himself, feeling the energy surge through him. He continued pedaling through the quiet neighborhood, crossing half a dozen blocks in short order. As he rode, something struck him as odd. Is today a holiday? Shouldn't more people be heading off to work? Kevin stopped at the next intersection and pulled out his phone, quickly typing "Is today a holiday" into the search bar. The results confirmed his suspicion, just another regular day. Well, darn, he sighed. I thought I was going to get lucky and go back to bed after this. With a huff, he resumed pedaling. He was only a couple more blocks away from his destination. As he turned onto the next street, the first rays of the sun began to peek over the horizon. While the warmth didn't yet reach him, the sky was painted in breathtaking hues of crimson and gold. As beautiful as that is, I'd much rather see it in pictures than be up for it, Kevin muttered as he continued down the street. He paid careful attention to the houses as he passed. Mr. Gregory's house looked like most of the others, and the last thing he wanted was to knock on the wrong door again. When he finally pulled up to a familiar-looking house, Kevin stared at it for a moment, nodding confidently. Okay, yeah, this is the right one, he assured himself. Kevin carefully rode his bike up the driveway, glancing at the car parked there. Inside, he could see a few boxes of candy from Mr. Gregory's store. Definitely the right one. He parked his bike by the side door, hopping off and giving the door a solid knock. When no one answered after about 30 seconds, he knocked again. Come on, Mr. G, I've got to get going if I'm going to finish before school. After another 30 seconds of silence, Kevin walked around to the front of the house. He knocked on the door, causing it to creak open slightly. I know this is a safe neighborhood, but you really should close your doors, Mr. G, Kevin called out, feeling a little uneasy. He waited patiently by the open door, but still, no one came. Glancing at his phone, Kevin realized he was running out of time. If he didn't pick up the candy soon, he wouldn't have enough time to make his deliveries. Taking a deep breath, Kevin knocked again, louder this time, as he stepped inside. Hey, Mr. Gregory? Mrs. Gregory? It's Kevin. I'm here to pick up the deliveries. Kevin gently shut the door behind him as he entered. Before he could call out again, an unsettling noise reached his ears, coming from the back bedroom down the hall. His first instinct was to shout for Mr. Gregory, but the eerie sound unnerved him. With cautious steps, Kevin made his way down the hallway toward the sound, which was an unsettling mix of muffled voices and wet, slurping noises. As he approached the back bedroom, the light from inside looked strange, shining directly onto the back wall as if the lamp had been knocked over. When Kevin reached the doorway, he saw signs of a struggle. The lamp and side table were on the ground, and blood splattered across the bed. Before he could fully take in the scene, the strange sound intensified, pulling his attention to the left. On the ground, an older woman's legs twitched as an older man knelt beside her, his mouth gnawing at her throat. Mr. Gregory, Kevin shouted in horror. Mr. Gregory's head snapped around at the sound, revealing a face twisted with vacant rage instead of the kind eyes Kevin had known. The man let out a low moan, dropping the chunk of flesh from his mouth as he staggered to his feet. Oh shit. Kevin spun around and sprinted down the hallway. He could hear the ghoul slam into the walls behind him as it tried to give chase. Kevin rushed to the front door, frantically grabbing the knob, but his sweaty hand slipped off the handle. Before he could try again, the creature was upon him. Kevin's survival instincts kicked in, and he ducked beneath the creature's arms just as it lunged for him. He barely managed to slip away as it crashed into the front door. Without looking back, he vaulted over the coffee table, putting more distance between them. Kevin looked back towards the creature that used to be his boss. He tried to speak, but the only sound that came from his mouth resembled a scream. The creature quickly locked eyes onto its prey and sprinted forward. However, its legs slammed into the coffee table. The ghoul fell forward, crashing through the glass top, becoming entangled in the frame that remained. Not wasting any time, Kevin bolted toward the kitchen door. His hands shook as he grabbed the knob, yanking with all his strength, but the deadbolt held firm. "Come on, come on." Kevin's voice trembled as he fumbled with the locks, the moaning and thrashing growing louder behind him. At last the door gave way and Kevin flung it open, dashing outside. He spun around, grabbing the exterior knob as the zombified Mr. Gregory barreled toward him. With a panicked scream, Kevin slammed the door shut, holding it closed with all his strength. The creature pounded against the door, its bloodied arms smacking the window as it tried to break through. Kevin gripped the doorknob with both hands, bracing himself for the worst. But after several moments, he realized something. The creature wasn't trying to open the door, it was too focused on breaking through. Cautiously, Kevin let go of the knob, taking a few steps back while keeping his eyes locked on the ghoul. Once he was sure the door would hold, he allowed himself a moment of relief. That moment didn't last. A blood-curdling scream echoed from across the street. Kevin whipped around to see an older woman struggling to hold her front door shut as two creatures tried to force their way inside. Before he could even think about helping her, the door gave way, and the three figures vanished inside the house. For a long moment, Kevin stood frozen in place, fear gripping him tightly. He forced himself to take a deep breath, steadying his nerves. "I have to get back home." Chapter 2. Kevin jumped onto his bike and began pedaling, tearing out of the driveway and making a hard left turn back in the direction of home. Upon reaching the intersection, he got a better view of the world, and it was not pleasant. The new morning sun lit the neighborhood just enough for him to see movement coming from virtually every direction. Some figures ran through the yards, chasing after who or what he couldn't guess. Others were in their homes, pulling curtains shut to conceal themselves. At least that's what it looked like to Kevin as he pedaled. He didn't want to stop to investigate if they were alive or like Mr. Gregory. The only thing he cared about was getting back home. Kevin continued pumping his legs hard, picking up speed on his bike and screaming down the next street. "One more block, then make the turn," he muttered to himself. "You'll be home before you know it." Kevin gave the pedals a couple more forceful kicks before steadying himself on them, allowing the bike to coast as he approached the next intersection. He leaned in hard to the turn, coming around the bend like he was shot out of a cannon. Barely half a block ahead, a wrecked car sat just off the road, the front end smashed against a tree. Around it were half a dozen creatures, all desperate to get to the driver inside. The sight caught Kevin by surprise, forcing him to slam on the brakes. The bike tires skidded to a halt so quickly that they caught an edge, sending Kevin tumbling over the handlebars. He slammed hard into the ground, knocking the wind out of him and sending the bike clattering to the pavement. Kevin gasped for air as he pulled himself up from the pavement, knowing that he was in trouble. He looked ahead towards the half-dozen creatures by the car, most of whom had taken notice of the young man laying helpless on the ground. Within seconds, 4 of them let out an excited moan and sprinted in his direction. Their thunderous footsteps on the pavement terrified Kevin, prompting him to scramble to his feet. Despite the pain coursing through his body, he managed to get up, grabbing the bike and yanking it off the ground. Kevin lifted his leg over the seat, only to have it catch on the back tire, causing him to stumble once again. He let out a pained grunt while scanning the area for any place that might offer refuge from the sprinting attackers. While none of the houses were open, he focused on a wooden privacy fence at the house across the street. From a distance, he swore the gate hung open ever so slightly. "You don't have a choice," Kevin told himself. "Move." Kevin pushed himself to start running, hobbling along for the first few steps as the pain of the crash shot through his body. When he reached the grass, he dared to look back, catching sight of the creatures gaining on him. Fear propelled him forward, running with everything his legs could muster. Even though they were off the street, he could hear the creatures' footfalls on the grass, getting closer. Kevin reached the gate, relieved to see that it was indeed cracked open, He knew he didn't have time to open it normally, so he did the only thing he could. He lowered his shoulder. Kevin slammed into the wooden gate hard, sending it flying back into the fence with enough force that it rebounded a bit. He reached out, grabbing it and flinging it back towards the ghouls right behind him. The gate smacked into the lead creature, which was a few steps ahead of its comrades, knocking it to the ground. The broken line of sight allowed Kevin to rush to the back of the yard, sliding to the ground and scurrying behind a tree. He quickly got back to his feet, pressing his back to the tree and minimizing his outline, hoping he was fully concealed. He stood motionless for several seconds, hoping he'd made it behind cover before any of the ghouls entering the yard had spotted him. Kevin scanned his surroundings, finding no good options. The back of the fence was a solid 7 feet high in flat wood. He knew even on his best day he would be lucky to get over it, and today certainly wasn't his best day. To his right sat a small wooden tool shed, the only other bit of cover in the yard. "Maybe if I can get inside, I can hide until they lose interest," he muttered. Kevin inched his head to the side, peeking out from cover. He immediately spotted 3 creatures looking around intently for him, while the other 3 remained obstructed by the gate. One of them on the other side was attempting to shove it open, only to have it smack into one of the creatures already inside the backyard. Kevin watched as the ghoul reacted to being hit by the gate, angrily moaning and smacking it. The noise drew the attention of the other zombies by the entrance, who turned to inspect the disturbance. "Move, move," Kevin muttered under his breath as he broke from cover, moving swiftly across the yard. He ran fast, staying on the balls of his feet to minimize the noise. When he approached the shed, he moved towards the back and slid on the wet grass behind cover. Kevin came to a stop, scrambling to his feet and moving to the corner of the structure. He looked towards the gate, seeing a couple of zombies looking back in his direction. They weren't running, but it was clear they thought they heard something. "Damn it," Kevin whispered. He tried his best to remain calm, even as the panic began to take hold. He turned to the other side of the shed, noticing a small window in the middle. While it wasn't big enough for a full-grown adult to hop through, his slight teenage frame might be able to squeeze in. He looked to the side of the yard, seeing that the fence was just as high as it was along the back. Knowing he was out of options, he moved to the window. "Please be unlocked." "Please be unlocked," Kevin whispered. He tried to lift it up, but the window didn't budge. After a few seconds of struggling, he realized the pane came out rather than up. He dug his fingernails into the wooden frame to get a grip, pulling it out just enough to get a hand on it. With the window open, Kevin jumped up, thrusting his arms through the small opening. The interior of the shed was in near total darkness, with only a sliver of light filtering through the back. Despite the lack of illumination, he managed to grab onto the edge of a table that rested against the back wall. With the extra stability, Kevin pulled himself into the small shed. However, his momentum was a little too much, causing him to slide off the table and onto the wooden floor. While he managed to catch himself with his hands, the landing made a louder noise than he would have liked. Through the walls of the shed, he heard an excited moan from the nearest zombie, followed shortly thereafter by the sound of running footsteps. Kevin moved as quietly as he could, scooting across the floor and hiding under the table. He remained completely silent as the creature outside smacked against the outer wall of the building with enough force to cause the window to slam shut. The extra noise excited the zombie, which thrashed against the building, drawing the attention of some of the other creatures in the yard. Kevin did the only thing he could, cower under the table and remain utterly still. He winced several times as more hands pounded on the wooden structure with such force that Kevin feared it might collapse. Minutes stretched on for what felt like an eternity, with the relentless noise echoing against the walls of the tiny building. Then, as quickly as the racket had begun, it stopped. Kevin sat motionless for another solid minute, not daring to move. He didn't know what had caused the creatures to leave, but he wanted to ensure he didn't do anything to bring them back. "You have to move," Kevin whispered to himself. "You have to get back home to Alana." He repeated those words under his breath, finally convincing himself to stand. Quietly, Kevin got to his feet, looking through the now blood-smeared window, relieved to see nobody on the other side. Kevin inched his way to the door of the shed, pushing it slightly open to get a better look at the yard. His eyes were immediately drawn to the back patio door of the house, now wide open. While he couldn't see inside, it wasn't hard to figure out what had taken place. "That poor person," Kevin muttered, letting out a sigh as he pushed on the door, stopping himself before stepping outside. He pulled out his cell phone, switching on the flashlight and shining it around the small space. "Come on, give me something I can use." Kevin's gaze honed in on a metal claw hammer hanging on the wall. He reached out and grabbed it, giving it a few practice swings to get a feel for it. "It's going to have to do," he murmured to himself. Summoning his courage, Kevin opened the door again, half expecting the zombies to have finished their meal and be coming back for him. He took several steps into the yard, keeping his focus on the patio door, knowing the creatures could emerge at any moment. He thought about making a run for the gate but adjusted his course, moving along the back of the house towards the open door. As he got close, he could hear the same sickening sounds he'd heard in Mr. Gregory's house. The urge to vomit hit him hard, but he held it in, continuing his approach to the door, pausing just before it. He dared not speak, but his mind was screaming at him to move. In a single motion, he darted from cover, grabbing the sliding patio door and slamming it shut. A split second later, one of the creatures inside smacked into the glass, smearing blood on the window as it tried to get outside. A few seconds later, two more of its friends joined it. Kevin stared at them for several moments, his hand still gripping the sliding door handle. Once he realized they weren't trying to open it, he let go. Rather than continue his escape, Kevin stood there, gazing at the creatures on the other side of the glass. Almost immediately, he noticed they had multiple bite marks. Some were minor, with chunks of flesh missing from their arms and legs, but each of them had a major wound around the neck, their torn and tattered shirts soaked in crimson. "So if you get bitten, you become one of them," Kevin muttered. "That's not good." Kevin shook his head, snapping himself out of the grim thought. "It doesn't matter," he told himself. "Get back on task and get back home." Chapter 3. Kevin walked with purpose towards the gate, gripping the hammer tightly in his hands. He paused briefly upon reaching the entrance, taking a quick look around the corner of the fence to ensure there weren't any other ghouls nearby. Once the coast appeared to be clear, he locked onto his bike and began running as hard as he could towards it. His head was on a swivel, scanning up and down the road as he approached, relieved to only see movement a couple of blocks away. He hopped onto his bike and began pedaling, putting some distance between himself and the previous house. As he rolled through the neighborhood, his eyes continued to dart around, searching for threats, fully aware they could come from anywhere. In his intense scanning, however, Kevin failed to notice the stop sign ahead. He was startled as a car horn blared at him, instinctively slamming on the brakes. His bike skidded to a halt just as a car swerved to avoid hitting him. The vehicle's tires screeched as the driver lost control, jumping the curb and crashing headfirst into a telephone pole. The engine whined, metal grinding against metal, and the horn blared incessantly for a solid 10 seconds before finally going silent. Kevin stared at the wrecked car for a few moments, then quickly looked around for rampaging zombies. "Forget about it, just ride. Get back home. Forget about the car, just go," he told himself. Despite his inner pleading, Kevin's feet didn't follow his brain's instructions. He stepped off the pedals, his sneakers landing firmly on the asphalt. "Damn it," Kevin muttered under his breath. "Yeah, it's your fault. So go check on the driver, then get moving." He stayed seated on the bike, using his feet to slowly roll toward the wrecked vehicle. As he neared the driver's side, he could see movement from inside the car, as well as blood smeared on the window. The sight of blood put Kevin on edge. He jumped off his bike, gripping his hammer tightly as he approached cautiously. The driver inside the car was moving erratically, making it difficult for Kevin to tell whether the man was disoriented from the crash or one of those creatures. Kevin took a deep breath, took another step forward, and lightly tapped the window. The sound startled the driver, causing him to jerk and inadvertently hit the horn again, which startled him even more. "Calm down, man. Calm down. I'm not going to hurt you," Kevin reassured him. Finally, the man inside opened the door, revealing a grim scene. He looked completely out of it, with blood covering his clothes and a poorly bandaged wound on his arm. Despite Kevin's apprehension, he tried to speak to the man, hoping to get some clarity. "Are you okay, man? Do you know your name? Do you know where you are? Kevin asked. The man squinted, as if trying to gather his thoughts. Yeah, kid, my name's Josh. And I don't know exactly where I am, but I know the hospital is a mile or so in that direction, Josh said, pointing down the street in a haphazard manner as he climbed out of the car. Kevin reached out, grabbing Josh's arm to steady him. Yeah, that's right, Josh. The hospital's down that way. But I don't think you want to be going there right now. I have to. My girl Mandy, she's... Josh's voice trailed off as he dropped to one knee, clutching his head, which was bleeding. He pulled his hand away, staring at the blood before letting out a grunt and forcing himself back to his feet. I have to get to her. She needs me. She needs me too. His words faded again, but this time his eyes widened with realization. He turned abruptly, reaching into the car and pulling out a blood-covered canvas bag. Look, kid, I have to go, Josh said, his eyes darting wildly before landing on Kevin's bike a few steps behind him. How much for the bike? Josh asked. On any other day, I'd gladly give you a price. But right now it's not for sale, Kevin replied. Josh's eyes grew wilder as he took a step closer to Kevin, who instinctively stepped back. Reaching into the canvas bag, Josh pulled out a stack of blood-covered 20s and extended it toward Kevin. Go ahead, kid, take it. There's got to be $500 here. You can get yourself a new bike, maybe some video games or whatever you're into. Kevin shook his head. Like I said, I appreciate the offer, man, but it's not for sale. The refusal only seemed to irritate Josh further. Tossing the money back into the bag, his tone shifted from pleading to something far more menacing. Kid, I'm not playing with you. You're going to give me that bike. Yeah, that's not going to happen, Kevin replied, standing his ground. The two locked eyes in a tense standoff, neither moving for several seconds. Kevin kept his grip firm on the hammer, and when he saw his chance, he turned and sprinted back to his bike. Josh, still woozy, was caught off guard by Kevin's sudden movement. This allowed Kevin to get the bike upright and start pedaling, but Josh, in desperation, grabbed onto the back of the seat, preventing Kevin from getting away. Give me the bike, kid, Josh shouted. Kevin knew reasoning wouldn't work. With a swift swing, he brought the hammer down, the metal making contact with Josh's hand. The sound of cracking fingers echoed even louder than Josh's scream of pain. Josh tried to hold on, but couldn't. Kevin pumped his legs harder, gaining speed. As he rode, the sound of Josh's cursing gradually shifted to something more desperate, pleading. Kevin glanced over his shoulder, just in time to see a pair of zombies sprinting from a nearby yard straight toward Josh. Josh, injured and disoriented, couldn't avoid the first ghoul. It slammed into him, sending both of them sprawling onto the asphalt. His legs kicked briefly, but a second zombie joined in, and that was the end of it. Though Kevin couldn't see exactly what was happening beneath the pile of bodies, the screams told him all he needed to know. Start riding. Now, Kevin barked to himself. Shaking off the horrific sight, he pedaled hard, speeding down the street. When he reached the next intersection, he slowed and looked both ways, not wanting to repeat the earlier mistake. You're almost there, he whispered to himself. Just keep those legs moving. Kevin turned onto his street, knowing his house was only a few blocks away, but he slammed on the brakes when he saw the chaos ahead. At the next intersection, two cars were motionless, one having T-boned the other. A dozen zombies swarmed around them, trying to break inside. Kevin stared in disbelief, flinching when the sound of glass shattering was followed by a woman's scream. It took him a moment to locate the source of the noise, the rear window on the opposite side of the wreck. One zombie was reaching inside, clawing toward the front seat in a frantic attempt to grab the driver. The woman continued to scream as she slapped the creature's hand away. Kevin felt paralyzed, unsure of what to do next. His house was just on the other side of this nightmare, but getting there wasn't going to be easy. He looked down at his bike and muttered, "What do you think, old buddy? If I get you going fast enough, can you get me past them?" He glanced back at the growing mob as more creatures emerged from a side street. With the way today's gone, a whole pack of them will probably come running out just before I get to the intersection, he sighed. Scanning the horizon, Kevin spotted a chain-link fence behind the corner house on the next side street. That's a crazy idea, he said to himself. Even if I make it over, I'll still have to cross another street before I can get home. On the other hand, a lot of the houses on my block have fenced-in backyards. This could work. Kevin's thoughts were interrupted by the sight of more zombies running toward the wreckage. You can always try the next block, he considered. Maybe they're not as thick up there. Before he could make a decision, several gunshots rang out from the next block, followed by silence. No matter where you go, it's going to be bad, Kevin muttered. Just pick up as much speed as you can and get over that fence. He repeated the mantra a few more times, trying to build his courage. But the excited moans coming from the yard next to him provided all the motivation he needed. 2 zombies rushed out of a nearby house, closing in fast. Kevin let out a frightened yelp and pushed the pedals as hard as he could. The bike accelerated quickly, putting some distance between him and the zombies. He could hear their footsteps behind him, but he kept his focus forward, knowing he had to push through the horde ahead at all costs. As Kevin neared the wreck, several of the creatures turned at the sound of the moaning zombies chasing him. "Damn it," he muttered. 3 zombies broke away from the wreck and sprinted toward him. Kevin kept pedaling furiously, refusing to change course. At the last second, he swerved to the right, hopping onto the sidewalk with a risky move. Much to his relief, he landed safely and rolled toward the side street. The bike wobbled a bit as he cut through the wet grass, but he managed to maintain control. He glanced down the street, spotting more zombies running wild, but thankfully none were headed his way. With the fence fast approaching, Kevin tightened his grip on the handlebars and prepared to leap off. As soon as the front tire left the asphalt, he jumped, launching himself off the bike. His feet hit the ground running, leaving the bike to crash into the grass behind him. Kevin dashed toward the fence, throwing himself forward in a desperate attempt to clear it. His gut hit the top bar, tearing his shirt and jabbing into his stomach as he flipped over. He landed hard on the other side, gasping for air, but quickly dragged himself forward a few more feet. Rolling onto his back, he gripped his hammer tightly, watching as half a dozen zombies slammed into the fence. The chain-link barrier wobbled dangerously under their weight, with one of the main supports beginning to lift out of the ground. Kevin struggled to catch his breath, his lungs burning as he fought to stand. "It's not going to hold forever," he told himself, panting. "You better get moving." Chapter 4. Kevin forced his legs to move, even as his gaze remained locked on the half-dozen zombies pushing against the weakening fence. It took a few seconds of prodding, but finally his legs responded to his brain. He turned and ran as hard as he could across the yard, reaching the other side and quickly leaping over the fence into the next yard. The moaning surrounded him, but he dared not look for the source. Kevin continued running through the yards, hopping several fences until he reached the last house on the corner. His breath came in ragged gasps, and a sharp pain shot through his side, forcing him to take a knee behind some bushes, hidden from view. He looked out toward the side street, barely 10 yards away, spotting several zombies milling about. On the other side of them lay 2 empty yards before he could reach the next fence to jump over. "That's a long way to run," Kevin muttered to himself, "especially if they take an interest in you. And there's enough of them out there that one of them is definitely going to notice when you run by." Kevin caught his breath behind cover, staring at the gauntlet of zombies he had to navigate. His body screamed for more rest, but the sound of screaming from the front of the house forced his hand. "Damn it," Kevin swore under his breath. He looked toward the road, watching as the zombies within view became agitated at the sudden noise. Several of them rushed toward the front of the house, but one creature's gaze locked onto Kevin, spotting him in the bushes. With an excited moan, the ghoul sprinted in his direction. "Move, move, move," Kevin shouted to himself, breaking from cover on instinct rather than thought. He picked up speed, setting himself on a collision course with the charging creature. Just before the ghoul got within arm's reach, Kevin dropped to his knees, the wet grass providing the perfect conditions to slide across the yard. The zombie's hands swiped just above Kevin's head as he slammed the hammer into the creature's kneecap. The impact cracked the bone, sending the ghoul crashing to the ground. Kevin scrambled back to his feet and kept running toward the road, glancing over his shoulder at the flailing creature. To his horror, the zombie was relatively unaffected by the blow. A living person would have been incapacitated for minutes, but the zombie's only limitation was the physical damage to its knee. Jesus Christ. Kevin muttered as he ran, the injured ghoul stumbling as its joint gave out, giving Kevin enough time to put some distance between them. He made it across the street, relieved to see no more zombies on this block, but the excited moans and footsteps of the pursuing creature spurred him forward. Almost there, he whispered between ragged breaths, pushing his legs to move faster. Within 15 yards of the fenced yard, his hope rose. But fear quickly overtook him as 2 more zombies ran into the backyard from the street. Realizing they'd reach him before he could get to the fence, desperation kicked in. Kevin threw the hammer as hard as he could at the lead ghoul, hoping to slow it down. His aim was true, but his arm strength was lacking. The hammer smacked into the ground a few yards in front of the zombie, coming to rest in the grass. Luck, however, was on Kevin's side. The lead creature stepped on the hammer, slipping on the grass, and brought down both zombie and tool. With a brief window of opportunity, Kevin summoned every last bit of strength he had left to reach the fence. With a leap, he barely cleared the top, crashing hard onto the ground on the other side. A few seconds later, the trio of zombies smacked against the fence, startling Kevin to his feet. He relaxed slightly once he saw they couldn't reach him. "1 more yard, and I'm home," Kevin muttered. He walked across his neighbor's backyard, his body aching, barely able to move faster. He hadn't made it halfway across when loud banging on the back door startled him. Kevin instinctively dropped into a defensive stance, scanning the yard for threats. Then he noticed the movement inside the house. Realizing he was safe, he relaxed and walked toward the back door. A zombified older man stood on the other side of the glass, pounding futilely against the door in an attempt to reach the fresh meal on the other side. Kevin stared at his neighbor with sorrow. "Damn, Mr. Hopkins," Kevin said softly. "Not you too." He locked eyes with the creature that had once been his friendly neighbor. No consciousness remained behind them. "You were always good to me and Alana," Kevin murmured. "And I'm sorry this happened to you." With a long sigh, Kevin forced himself to keep moving, heading toward the gate at the side of the house. He stayed low, making sure none of the creatures could spot him. Poking his head above the fence, Kevin scanned his front yard and the street. A couple of creatures wandered around the yard across the street, but they were too far away to notice him. Kevin pulled the keychain from his pocket, gripping the side door key. "Walk soft and get inside," he whispered to himself. "You can do it." He nodded before gently opening the gate and stepping out. Rather than sprint for the door, Kevin moved slowly, deliberately, keeping an eye on the zombies across the street. His caution paid off as he reached the door without drawing their attention. Kevin slipped the key into the lock, opening the door and closing it behind him as quietly as possible. Once it was secured, he rested his head against the wall, relief washing over him. "What are you doing home already?" A voice called from the kitchen. Kevin yelped, startled by Alana's voice. Her laughter quickly faded as she noticed the blood on his clothes. "Oh my God, Kevin. Are you okay? Did you fall off your bike again?" Alana asked, concern replacing the humor. Kevin looked down at his clothes, confused. He wasn't sure where the blood had come from, but he knew it wasn't his. "Yeah, sis, I'm fine," Kevin replied. "Good," Alana said with a relieved sigh. "Do you have time to fix me some breakfast?" A smile crept onto Kevin's face as he nodded. "Yeah, I can. Just let me wash up first. Why don't you go get comfortable on the couch?" Alana let out a small coughing fit before heading into the living room. Kevin stood there, relieved his sister was safe. Then reality hit him and he darted into the next room, pulling the curtains closed and ensuring the front door was locked tight. "What are you doing?" Alana asked. Kevin hesitated, wanting to protect her from the horrors outside. But he knew he had to tell her something if they were going to be safe. "Alana, something bad is happening outside," Kevin said. "What is it?" she asked. "I don't know exactly, but I need you to listen to me carefully. You can't go outside, and you can't look out the windows." Alana laughed, thinking he was teasing her. "Are you messing with me right now, Kevin? That's not very nice. You know I don't feel good." Kevin walked over to the couch and sat beside her, speaking in a calm yet urgent tone. "I'm serious, Alana. Something very bad is happening outside, and people are getting hurt. Hurt bad." The seriousness in his voice caused Alana to well up. She struggled to hold back tears, a few slipping out as she looked at her phone. "Is that why I can't get through to Mom?" she asked. Kevin gently took the phone from her, scrolling through the text messages. In the last half hour, Alana had sent a dozen messages, each one more worried than the last. "I'm sure Mom's fine," Kevin reassured her. "She's tough and smart." As if on cue, the phone vibrated in his hand. A new text message appeared on the screen. It contained a single line, "I love you both very much." Alana began to cry harder as Kevin pulled her close. "She's going to be all right, isn't she?" Alana asked, repeating the question over and over as she cried into his shoulder. Kevin stroked her hair, whispering, "She'll be fine, Alana. Mom's tough." He looked ahead in a daze, then focused on the television. Reaching for the remote, he clicked it on. "Come on," Kevin said. "Let's find something fun to watch. There might be a game show or something on." Alana didn't respond, continuing to sob. Kevin kept stroking her hair as he flipped through the channels. After a moment, he found a sitcom rerun. "Hey," he said softly, tapping her on the shoulder. "It's that show you like, the one with the people hanging out at the coffee shop. Let's watch." Alana sniffled, lifting her head to look at the screen. She wanted to keep crying but forced herself to pay attention. "Can you make me some breakfast?" she asked quietly. "Of course, sis," Kevin said with a soft smile. "Just sit here and watch the show. I'll fix you something tasty." "Pancakes?" Alana requested. "Pancakes sound great," Kevin replied. He kissed her softly on the top of the head before making his way to the kitchen. He lingered by the refrigerator for a moment, then glanced at the door. "A quick look couldn't hurt," he muttered. Kevin stepped to the door, pulling back the corner of the curtain to peek outside. He couldn't see much, but he did spot a couple of zombies sprinting across the yard in pursuit of something, or someone just out of view. He sighed, letting the curtain fall back into place. "We'll have breakfast and then figure this out," Kevin whispered to himself. "We're going to be okay." He repeated the phrase over and over, trying to convince himself. It wasn't working, but he kept saying it, hoping the words would take hold. The end. Bend.